I suppose in this case, I'll be ranking the films from impressive to most impressive. All right. So I have not done this before at all, actually. So lately I've been sort of doing redos on some of my earlier lists from before I had like any subscribers. But this one's new. I actually haven't done a ranking of the Star Wars movies before. And so I'm going to do that. I waited a little while to do this because I wanted to see Solo. And this seemed like the good time to do it. I mean, episode 9's not out yet, so we don't have the completed saga. But we're a year and a half away from getting episode 9. This seems like about as good a time as any. So, with that in mind, let's do this. And we're going to go from the bottom up to the top. And oh so conveniently, there's 10 of these. So, starting at the bottom, number 10, episode 1, The Phantom Menace. So, oh boy. I had a long, drawn-out sort of battle with myself as to what goes at the bottom, either this or the next one. Because a lot of friends I have put the next movie I'm going to talk about at the very bottom and rank this slightly above it. I just can't. I can't in all good consciousness. There are only two good things about this movie. There is the Darth Maul fight, and there's the soundtrack. And that's it. The special effects were okay at the time. I mean, they were kind of impressive insofar as they looked sort of new, but they didn't even really look convincing at the time. You know, Anakin, I don't want to harp too much on Jake Lloyd, because no kid. They could have had Haley Joel Osment, who, you know, was a phenomenal, as a young actor. But holy crap, nobody could have made good on those lines. And this script was atrocious. It reads like a first draft script. It's really amateur hour. And I think that really shows the problem with having George Lucas be George Lucas at that point. I mean, who was going to tell him no? Nobody. And we see what happened. And I think after this came out, we got a much clearer picture of how much the original trilogy was all his original core ideas, but were being filtered and tempered by other people around them. And this is basically just, this is uncut Lucas, and it's not good. The Jar Jar Binks, the midichlorians, that's probably the biggest problem I have with this thing, if I'm to single out one single thing. I know some people will say that the pod race is good, except that it's too long and it's dull. It's kind of exciting to see in a theater. Try watching it at home if you haven't in a while. It's kind of dull. Yeah. Darth Maul looks cool and the fight's, neat. And the music's really good. Props to John Williams. That's it. That's all this thing has going for it. Moving up to number 9, the one that, like I said, most of my friends consider to be the worst one. And that's episode 2, Attack of the Clones. So, the thing is with Attack of the Clones, and this is a debate I will be having again with myself, with the ranking of a couple of other things on this list. But, it was an argument of there are a couple of high points in episode 1. Only 2, to my reckoning, but they do exist. Whereas Attack of the Clones is a whole lot of... It's a white noise of a movie. And I know everyone has memed the heck out of the I hate sand thing, but honestly, in the movie itself, it's it doesn't stand out as much as you'd think. It doesn't stand out as oh my god, this part, it's so bad. I mean, it's weird and awkward, but most of the movie's weird. It just sort of stays at this one level throughout the whole thing. I'll admit to kind of liking the Yoda fight. I have friends who hate that. It's okay, but even that, like, it's not as good as the Darth Maul fight, and the music's fine, but there's nothing as memorable here as Duel of the Fates was. So it doesn't have the highs, limited though they are, of episode 1, but it also doesn't have anything as soul-crushing as 10-year-old Anakin or midichlorians. Or Jar Jar Binks. Well, technically it has Jar Jar Binks. He's there, but he's been toned way back. Or had a lot of his screen time cut. So, yeah, this just edges out episode 1 to come in at number 9. And now as we get into 8 and 7, it's the next two movies where I had a very similar debate and ended up sort of doing the opposite that I just did here. So, I guess you can consider me consistently inconsistent. So number 8, Solo. Solo is not a bad movie, but I'm hard-pressed to tell you what's good about it. There's not a lot wrong with it. There's not a lot that's actually bad. I think the Darth Maul reveal was dumb because it doesn't make sense unless you are a hardcore fan of the TV shows, which most people aren't. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sure it was very cool for those of you that you did know, but for the rest of us, it was a great big what the hell, But aside from that, like, it's not bad. There's really nothing especially wrong with it, but there's just nothing especially great about it. There aren't really any moments that make you go, "Oh yeah, that right there." It's got a pretty good cast that does pretty well. Chewie and Han have decent chemistry. Woody Harrelson was good. Donald Glover was good. But it doesn't add up to much. These few good components don't really feel like they get a chance to shine in a meaningful way. And this is a movie I've seen twice because, I saw it when it first came out, and then I saw it again because my mother wanted to see it. And I didn't regret seeing it a second time, but what are you going to do? So that brings us to number 7, which, as I said, and even as I'm recording this, part of me is debating, should I swap these back? But I'm just going to stick with it. Know that they are basically neck and neck. 7 and 8 are basically a tie, but they're just they're just low on the list for different reasons. So number 7 is The Last Jedi. My problems with The Last Jedi, because I have them, and they are numerous, are not the problems most people have with The Last Jedi. I don't have a problem with this depiction of Luke. I don't have a problem with Leia flying through space. I don't have a problem with Rey. I think Kylo Ren is awesome in this. I don't have the big problems that most fans who really dislike this movie have with it. That being said, it's structurally a mess. Some of the characters act really stupidly. Rose and Admiral Holdo being a couple of the big ones. The entire Canto Bight thing, it's not just a matter of like, oh, and there's more of this Rose stuff, and they bring up all the children and SJWs and animal rights. It's nothing like that. It's just structurally pointless. It's a complete divergence. It's a side quest with no stakes. So that entire thing doesn't work. There's a whole bunch of things that I dig the concept of, but the execution is wonky. Yet at the same time, there's stuff that I genuinely love in this movie. I love what is being done with Kylo Ren. I love that throne room fight. There are a number of things that happen across this movie that I really think are phenomenal. And then there's the lows that just sink the whole dang thing. So this is a bit like, as I said, with Attack of the Clones and Phantom Menace, where going between this and Solo, one is more just mediocre and the other has higher highs but lower lows. And in this case, I did go the other way, but like I said, I really do. They're practically tied, but it's because I am genuinely impressed by the parts that work in this movie because I really enjoy them. I just wish they were in a better movie overall. Next up, number 6. Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. I actually do enjoy this movie. Like, unironically, I enjoy this movie. I have fun with it. And I think the tension is decent. I think the fall of Anakin is slightly clunky, slightly ham-fisted, but it works for me. For a big, overblown space opera, I think it works. And I like the fight. Love was an overstatement, but I like the fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan. One of them needed to have a different colored lightsaber, but aside from that, I like that because there was a good emotional resonance to it that I appreciated. Honestly, the Order 66 sequence, that choked me up first time I saw it. The moment that choked me up was Yoda falling to his knees and the music kind of swells. And you're realizing he's feeling the deaths of his friends. I choked up seeing that. Like, it works. It's genuinely powerful, I think. While the overall fall of Anakin is a little bit clunky, I think that the seduction scene with the tale of Darth Plagueis the Wise and all of that, people can say how awkward it is, but again, for the kind of stories that Star Wars are, I think it works, and it's a nice, slow-paced, quieter moment. The action in this is better. It feels like they integrate the CGI better overall, and it's not as sectioned off and very clearly, here's the CGI, here's the real people stuff. I enjoy this movie. It's not great. It's got plenty of problems. It still has Darth Vader going, no! Which is awful. And even its highs aren't amazing, but this is one I will pop in for pleasure. All 4 of the ones I've listed below this, even the ones that I've seen more than once, I don't really have a desire to see any of those again from however many times I've seen them up to this point. I enjoy watching this one. I'll still pop it in. So moving on up to number 5, we come to Rogue One. This is one where if I couldn't see the stitches from the troubled development of it, then it would have had, almost definitely would have been higher, because the first, definitely the first act, maybe the first 2 acts, are clunky and awkwardly stitched together. Basically, up until they get to the planet where Jyn Erso's father dies. Up until then, it's just sort of jumping along from plot point to plot point, some of which don't really need to be in there. The whole thing with Forrest Whitaker's character, like, I appreciate, like, versus, say, the Darth Maul thing from Solo, I appreciate that this was a better way to pull a character from the cartoons or whatever, because you didn't need to know he came from that for him to make sense as a character. That said, he still didn't add a lot. And so that was kind of unnecessary. But that third act, man, that third act is gangbusters. As they get there and watching this team get whittled down as they start to fall to accomplish this mission. And then, of course, as a wonderful little icing on the cake, we get Vader in the most badass mode he has ever been in. And yeah, I like this one. Again, if it had a smoother front end, it could have been a lot higher. Number 4, Episode 7, The Force Awakens. I enjoyed this movie. It has become oddly fashionable, I think, largely in the wake of the divided opinion on The Last Jedi to crap on this movie. And I think that's wrong. The movie's not perfect, especially in light of The Last Jedi. It's very obvious that it's setting up some stuff that either doesn't pay off or pays off in like an anti-payoff, which I think is just poor delivery of some of these concepts. But take it as a film unto itself. I love the pacing. I love the flow. I like the dialogue and the feel of the new characters. I love Poe and Finn together. They're terrific. I like Rey. I don't have a problem with Rey. Actually, in either movie. I definitely don't have a problem with her here. I think Harrison Ford is not sleeping through this movie, which he kind of tends to do these days. But he's awake, he's alert, he's present, he's good. And, you know, it looks and feels like Star Wars. It's exciting to have back. And I think it's a good time. It is proving to not be as well planned out overall as I would have liked to now be feeling, having seen the next entry, but I still, like, I don't own The Last Jedi. I probably never will. I do own this, and I watch this, and I like it. So to nobody's surprise, we have got the top three are taken up with the original trilogy. So let's get this out of the way. Number 3, Return of the Jedi. Really, the only complaint I can level against this one would be the Ewoks. And even then, I don't have a problem with the fact that the Ewoks are cute. I think what they should have done with the Ewoks wasn't that they won through tweeness and, you know, logs versus high-tech weaponry. I think they should have won through Zulu tactics, i.e. sheer numbers. They should have been swarming all over those stormtroopers like ants. You know, that would have been the way I would have gone with it. Of course, that would have been more expensive. But I think pretty much all of this works. Like, the one criticism I've heard about it, and I don't necessarily share it, but I get it, is that this feels like Luke's movie, whereas the franchise up to this point has felt more like ensemble, especially by the end of Empire Strikes Back. It felt like we were dealing with all these characters, and everybody kind of gets sidelined so that we can wrap up Luke's story specifically. And I hear that, but at the same time, I think that plays out so well. Like, that final fight between him and Vader, which is actually my favorite lightsaber battle. Not because it's especially visually arresting. It's solid. It's competent. But I love the contrast of the red and green. I love the music that plays during their fight. And I love the emotion behind this. I love that Luke beats him not through taking the higher ground, which he tries to do, but it doesn't work. And he lets loose. He beats Vader down brutally, but then realizes what he did and takes a step back. And I like that. I think the space fights are all good. The whole thing at Jabba's palace is... It's a bit of a divergence in terms of the overall narrative this thing is going for. But man, it's cool. Man, it's awesome. Like, I just have a good time with this one. So the top 2, you know what they are. So I'm going to tell you the second one. Now, at this point, I'm also going to make something clear if you hadn't guessed this already. There is a difference between favorite and best. I am doing this ranking as my favorites, while acknowledging that what I have at number 2 is the best Star Wars movie in terms of being a complete experience, writing, directing, visuals, acting, the works. Number 2 is The Empire Strikes Back, because it is the best. It is the best movie. It's the best made. It's the best written. It's the best acted. Maybe it's not the best looking, but it's up there among the best looking. It's the best looking of the original trilogy, definitely. And I think it is a really phenomenal achievement in terms of what it was able to do to make the world of the original film bigger and yet make the story more personal. That is an impressive balancing act to be able to pull off. And it is the best Star Wars movie from any objective measure. But it's not my favorite. My favorite's Episode 4, A New Hope. And I think it's just because it has the stuff that captured my imagination the most. And honestly, it probably more than anything comes down to the trench run. Because when I was little, and I would quote unquote play Star Wars, because I didn't have Star Wars toys. I wasn't like denied them or anything, but you gave me the choice. I usually went for He-Man. I was like, I've got Star Wars toys that are this big, and I've got a He-Man toy this big. Yeah, I'm going for that. But when I would pretend that I was in Star Wars, I was in a TIE fighter. I was in an X-Wing. I was working the gun turrets on the Millennium Falcon. When I was a kid, we used to go to the 4th of July and to see the fireworks, and I went with my mother and my grandparents. They would lay out a blanket for me, and I would lay down and I'd watch the fireworks, and I actually would do this picturing that I was working the cannons on the Millennium Falcon, and that each explosion of a firework was me blowing up another ship. The things that in my mind are truly Star Wars, because I mean, look, I like lightsabers, I like the Force, I like all that stuff, but the sense of adventure and the spaciness of it, I feel is at its purest in the original film, because it is much more than any others. It is an adventure. Because, Empire Strikes Back, it gets very personal, it gets very heavy. And then Return of the Jedi, it's wrapping that up. It's still dealing largely with the personal stories. It's about dealing with the consequences. It's about trying to change fate. It's about family. The first one's, it's just a fun adventure. It's like you stumbled across a distress signal. Like basically Luke comes across a message in a bottle, goes on an adventure to rescue a princess, and then destroys the enemy's base. That's just rollicking adventure. And that, to me, is Star Wars. Or at least that's my Star Wars. I'm not going to say definitively that is what Star Wars is, but that's what Star Wars is for me. Is that sense of adventure that I think has not been captured in quite the same way by any other film in the franchise. And so that is why A New Hope is my #1 favorite Star Wars movie. What do you think about this list? How wrong am I? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. There's all the stuff to do, such as like and subscribe and support me on Patreon, follow me on Twitter, listen to a podcast, send something to the P.O. Box. I don't know. I never plug that. Links for all that stuff is down in the description. So until next time, this council is adjourned.